My guest today is Donna Roy, a federal advisory board staff member at Smartsheet. Donna, thanks so much for taking the time. It's great to catch up once again.
Thank you for having me.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. Data. It's at the heart of every federal mission, and collecting that data in a usable format has never been more important and maybe never more difficult given the continued move to the cloud, the assortment of devices and methods to collect that information. You can add to that challenge the data collection and management of things like the Paperwork Reduction Act, the Privacy Act, the E-Government Act, the rules, the regulations that really govern how agencies can collect and really maintain all these data sources, and then also how to bring government data into the digital age. All that plays a role in building trust and reducing costs. This has been a long time challenge. OMB found in 2024 that a lot of these challenges continue to affect agencies. 45% of all federal websites were not mobile friendly. 60% of all federal websites have a possible accessibility issue, and 2% of all federal government forms have only been digitized. And that is, when they use digitization, they define it as a dynamic online form, not just a fillable online PDF. As part of this 21st Century Idea Act, OMB laid out a set of goals, 100 of them, to transform and evolve and standardize citizens' online experience. They've had some pilots, including one focused on website accessibility and digitizing public-facing forums. So how can agencies continue to make this progress, do even better? Well, Donna Roy from Smartsheet, that's where you come in. Let's talk about this problem. Why are we still talking about forums today? Why is it so difficult?
Let me tell you, when I joined DHS, I was the head of data management. One of my jobs was to figure out what the challenges the components had and help them. And so I ran into a couple of use cases that worried me a bit, right? So U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services. When I was at DHS, they had 80 forms that you could use throughout the applicant process. 80% of that data was the same across the 80 forms. We're collecting the same data, often different ways. And we're doing that because the forms, they iterated over time. One form might be updated every 5, 6, 7 years, and so the way they collect a name was different 5 years ago than it is today. And so that creates a lot of downstream problems with the data. When you look at FEMA, they had 60 forms across federal agencies and partners to apply for disaster assistance. On your worst day, you needed to navigate 60 forms, fill out data multiple times. Filling out data multiple times when you're tired, when you're hungry, creates errors. I had to fill out security paperwork 3 times in a week. And the third time, I got my social security number wrong, which totally messed up that process. And so, you know, we just don't want people filling out forms over and over again, but we're still doing it. So FEMA, CIS all have large modernization projects, right? They've been working at this. And I'm sure since I left in 2019, they've made a lot of progress. But not everyone has a large budget. And so sort of 9,858 forms, 2% of them automated, 2%. That's a lot of have-nots in the government. With the funding going where it is, it's a little worrisome. 106 billion forms processed annually across the federal government. 106 billion forms moved around. 10.5 billion hours spent by the public filling out those forms. And I don't think this is true, $38 billion spent annually on manual paper processes. I would estimate it's probably higher than that. And so the government operates on these forms, but many of the forms don't capture data in the way that it sort of needs to. And so this is how it should go. You present a form, the applicant or the member of the public enters the form. The data is stored somewhere. Maybe it's automatically sent for an approval or review. Maybe it has to go back to the applicant for a formal signature. All of that should be automated. And the data I enter in the first step should be there at the last step, end to end, right? And it takes a lot of money to automate those processes. And so I think 2% really is indicative of the problem, 2%. Large modernization, hundreds of $millions to sort of wind your way out of this problem.
You want to go back to the use cases because I think they're great examples. And even if you say FEMA and USCIS has made some progress, did they know it was a problem? Did you weren't the first one to bring this to their attention that like, hey, 80% of this data is the same? What was the reaction? Was it just, well, we'd love to change, but we don't have the money, or what?
When I first started at DHS, this was before digital services became a big deal, before the healthcare blew up. And there was a lot of movement on understanding that data was a problem. I was the head of data management. I was working on pushing out ways to architect data, ways to sort of find the commonalities. I ran the NEAM program, which has now moved to OASIS, and that allowed me to dig into a lot of these problems to find those commonalities. The boom of the US digital services, though, created a different focus for these forums. It all became about software and the cloud, software and the cloud, right? And so I think during the first few years of the digital services, people stopped talking about data architecture or the common data behind the forms. And what they were really doing is, can I automate this form? And that automation today takes a whole host of skills, right? Takes a UX designer to make sure the form is easily understood by the applicant or the member of the public, right? Does it look right? Will they be able to navigate the form? Then it takes a front-end developer to actually develop the form. Then it takes a back-end developer to connect the data to the form, and then the database administrator to make sure it's stored in the right place, and the cloud person to make sure it's backed up. And it's a whole ecosystem now, which is why it's expensive. And if you do it form by form, which is how they were doing it at CIS, or if you do it form by form, agency by agency, which was what the problem at FEMA was, then you're still out of sync. And so it's just an expensive problem to solve.
Here we are 4, 5, 6 years later since you've left, and the digital, you have the IDEA Act I mentioned, you have some other focus. What are you seeing today from agencies? Are they a little better? Do they understand that it's the data, it's the data stupid, right? Or are they still too much focus on that let's automate this form, let's automate that form, and not worry about the kind of that back end?
The Evidence Act brought a lot of focus back to the data issues. But the first couple of years, honestly, were about policy, where the CDO sits, how much money should the CDO have. I had a lot of arguments on where it should happen in DHS before I left. And so I think a lot of the progress slowed, and you're starting to see it come back. I've been working with some of the components and see a lot of progress, but it's still form by form. And they're iterating and sort of putting the new data in and comparing it to the last form that's sort of like it. And there's a lot of time spent on the back end, though. Streamlined case processing. I'm sure you've read it in the news. Maybe you've even covered it, right? Reducing the backlog in immigration meant sort of taking all of the data behind those forms and trying to apply AI, which is the right thing to do, to streamline the decisions that you were going to automatically make using the data, right? If you can automate it and you get to 99.9% the same answer, you should automate it, right? So they're streamlining it. They're taking care of the process in the back end, but it's still a slog to get through all of those forms.
And it remains, it sounds like, a data problem as well. The lack of focus on the data architecture piece. I remember you mentioned NEAM. That's a kind of a blast from the past. I recently had discussed data architecture a little bit with Mark Foreman, with Sharendra Paul, all names from the past, and how these folks, how there's maybe this movement back to, okay, can we understand the data? Yeah. Is that what agencies are starting to, you're hearing conversations about today, is okay, if we want to become more efficient, we've got to stop doing these one-offs and looking at, okay, how do we start with the data and then work forward versus maybe work for the forms and work back?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet, but I think I have a lot of hope. And I have hope because there's a lot of conversation around pushing AI. AI is going to push the need to understand the data in a way that maybe we hadn't have the appetite for because there was no reason for it, right? Data management, data quality are hard conversations to have when you have less money than you can pay your bills off. Or sort of, as a CIO, you're constantly worried about just keeping up with your maintenance and not your development, right? So. And so it's hard to be speculative or forward-leaning on problems like how do we really structure the data? How do we take care of the data problem first? And the forms will come off naturally. But I have a hope, like as we sort of try to push AI forward, we'll fall into the, oh, well, the data's not exactly what I thought it was going to be like. And so what is the data? And so I think it'll evolve. But I'm also hopeful, honestly, that we're going to start using AI to clean up data and to understand data. But the impact of the forms, so this is what I know after 40 years of being in IT. If you get the form right, if you get the first data entry screen wrong, downstream, you're just paying for it for years. You're building up technical debt. And so this is what will happen. You won't have the right country code list. And so someone will be applying for a benefit, but it won't be tagged to the right policies for those benefits. And so they will sort of get stuck in a process. You won't have their address correctly coded for international, and they'll get mailed something, or they'll get mailed, or they'll miss it, right? And you stop the process. And so even further down, when I was working on the terrorism-related info, matching that data in the back end when it's really, really dirty just causes a lot of problems downstream, which then delays benefits coming to the citizens and the people who want to be citizens in this country.
What you're really referring to is this need for data standards, this need for, okay, can we all get together, those agencies for FEMA, and say, how are we going to do the name? It's going to be first name, last name, first name. Do we need a middle initial? Do we need the full middle name? And there was some of that was happening, I think, back in the mid-2010s, but seems to, we don't talk about it much anymore. Is it because it was too hard, because there's not enough push from the White House or OMB, or what do you think happened, and why is AI now the one that the new kind of reason to have these data standards?
Even if it was a mandate, people would find it hard to spend $1 on standards over spending $1 on bullets, guns, beds, the things that are for the mission, right? And so it's just never something that's been funded. And what gets measured gets done in the federal government. It was on no one's scorecard to worry about this. And so it was always a cajoling effort. Schmedger would call it a call to action for volunteers. And so it was the 10% of the people who really wanted to get it done got it done. But I'm actually keen to watch NEAM as an OASIS standard, and as it sort of continues to curate the domains that they are sort of working in.
And going back, because we're pushing up against break, but I just want to touch upon the AI piece for a second. To get good AI, you have to have good data. You know, again, we go back to the beginning, it's all about the data. Do you think that because, one, we have workforce reductions, you have budget reductions, and people are more comfortable with AI, that's going to drive that data standardization? Finally, someone's going to say, I can't get this AI to either work, or I'm going to use AI to standardize my data. I'm going to make every name, first name, last name, middle initial, or some sort of combination. Is that why you have some more hope than maybe you did a year or 2 or 3 ago?
I have that hope, and I also have the hope that we're back to not developing everything from scratch and custom code, right? Yeah. There's really 3 ways to do anything as a CIO you're looking at. Create it from scratch, have a full digital team. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time, but you get exactly what you want until it breaks, and then you have to fix it. You can buy a commercial off-the-shelf software, roll it out, and have everyone mad at you because it's brittle. It doesn't fit their process. My procurement form doesn't look like that. I can't use this system. It's broken. Those 2 really caused the boom of the low-code generation of products, Dynamics, Salesforce, ServiceNow. When I was the CIO at the CFPB, I was spending way too much money on ServiceNow and customizations of Salesforce. And so if you look at it, there's a new generation of products now that are no-code. Like literally, the promise of no-code is here today, and you can unleash that no-code for people to make their work better, to collaborate. And you can create a form. You can have that form tied to data. You can have that data tied to a workflow. You can have that workflow tied to a final signature process, sort of all end to end. And I can do it. And I'm pretty sure we could teach you to do it. So it really is a no-code solution. And so I think the combination of spending what we can on commercial systems, modifying them, using a practical, rational approach to some of the low-code, but then unleashing the no-code for those that either don't have the budget or have the appetite to go in and fix their process.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to jump into those maybe 3 ways, talk a little bit more about each of them, and then spend most of our time on no code. I'm fascinated already. But first, we'll take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Donna Roy, a Federal Advisory Board member at Smartsheet. Donna, in the end of the last segment, you laid out kind of 3 ways to solve some of these problems. You mentioned build it from scratch. You mentioned buy COTS, or commercial off the shelf, and then no code. We're going to spend most of the time probably talking no code, but let me just start with the first 2. What's wrong with custom software? It works out perfectly. It's always on time, on budget. It always gets exactly what the users want.
Absolutely.
Isn't that the
it
rules?
was like Nirvana.
It's like Nirvana.
It is. Custom development is great for organizations who are well-funded, can attract a talent pool consistently, and do this for their everyday business. And so Google, Facebook, this is what they do for business. The government takes more time to do it, and while we're doing it, again, 2% of the forms are only done. 2%. That's terrible. And so it takes a lot of time, a lot of money to get it right. It is talking about sitting with users, gathering user stories, doing the design, all of the things that the commercial vendors do, you're doing for a very specific, unique problem inside of an agency. That's why the EO, I think, is really rightly focused on commercial use of software as much as possible. And so with custom, you work your way into just more O&M.
Yeah.
The more code you write, this just is how it is, the more code you write, the more you need to maintain. If it's someone else's job to maintain it, you can actually just then start solving the business problem. And so I think the EO is realizing that maybe the government isn't as good at large-scale software development as we think we are, or maybe it just can't afford to do it that way anymore because it is timely and expensive, and we're not making progress on creating a digital economy here, removing the forms and really honoring better ways to use our data in the government.
And then we have so here we are, let's buy COTS. Let's just buy it off the shelf, right? I'm going to go to Best Buy, remember Circuit City, we can go there.
Yeah.
Nobody beats the Wiz in New York, right?
Yeah.
Why can't I just buy that? What's wrong with that?
Well, you can for some things.
Yes.
Right. And so there's a lot of government software that is deployed. So my favorite while I was at DHS was watching the financial systems modernization. Ooh. I know. It's still sort of
How
my
many
favorite
years?
to watch. They're still doing it.
They're still doing it. Still a problem.
And so when you develop a commercial product that is meant to serve hundreds of people, this is the same situation with shared services, right? Hundreds of agencies have to use it, the less useful it becomes because you can only agree on 10 things as opposed to the 100, right? And so then when you implement it, it's brittle. It doesn't follow your process. Well, you can teach people a new process, but it doesn't use your data, so you have to customize it. And every time you customize it, it's like developing code. Every time you customize it and you more highly customize it, the harder it is to upgrade it. And so then 6 months down the road, you've customized it, they're going to upgrade it, it breaks everything. Well, then you learn, maybe I don't customize it so much. Or you keep going and then you just don't upgrade. And when you don't upgrade, you get situations like solar winds and you have an increased cyber threat. And so there's no perfect solution in IT. That's why we will be employed forever. But there are best fit solutions for the problem. And so some problems really are served great by ServiceNow or by Salesforce or by Microsoft Dynamics, but not all of them. Some solutions should be custom, but not all of them. But if we go much more towards a no-code solution, I think you can have that nice blend. And so part of it's around what should your solution be for this particular problem set.
Let's talk about what the solution should be for forms. You mentioned no code. That's a little bit of a misnomer because there's always code. We're talking about software still. Mm-hmm. But so let's start with a very basic explanation. When you say no code, what do you actually mean there versus what it sounds like?
Yep. So I fell in love with Smartsheet when I was at DHS. I saw it in one of the incubator firms who sort of bring federal employees in to take a look at things. And this is Donna's description, so the Smartsheet. team might cringe a little bit, but I see it as easy as this. And I'm pretty good at Excel, so I'll just use an analogy. I've become an Excel wizard because I was a government employee. It's kind of required.
Not Lotus 1, 2, 3?
Yeah. No, I started there.
All right.
But it's as simple as that. You can start a sheet, right? You start a sheet, you have rows and columns. You name the columns what you want to name them, and you start collecting data. You can map those columns to a form. Create the form. It's very easy to create the form. And then you can automate the workflow right from that sheet. It's like you're in Excel, but you have all these superpower features that Excel doesn't have, as an example. So I can create that sheet, create the form, create the workflow, and move that out in a matter of hours. We saw some of the work during COVID get automated. Remember having to attest that you got the vaccine? And you had to carry a vaccination form around. I had to attest when I onboarded at Guidehouse that I had vaccines, and they automated it through Workday, which is another low-code platform. You could take someone who is right out of school, understands Excel and Excel formulas, they could automate that in hours. You could start then collecting data from your employees. It's as easy as sending that form via email. You don't even have to open a system up. You enter the data in the email, it goes right into the form, and you're done, right? It is so much smoother to collect data consistently and fast, and so much faster to develop it. It's really just formula-based, and I would say it is customization or configuration-based.
And that's why the answer to the form challenge with 2%, and you mentioned 9,800 some odd forms that are out there. Yep. That's why saying, okay, well, if we're collecting the same data over and over again, 80% of the same data across FEMA or across USCIS, that can be done through this no-code type of approach, because it's, all right, every time someone puts their name in, this is what it has to be. Every time someone puts their address in, this is what it has to be. Yep. It's just that straightforward.
You could set the form up and then just map it. You set the form up once, and you just collect data and map it to it. You don't actually have to print the form. That's my favorite. When people print forms and then they email them or fax them, they're still fax machines. There are fax machines. They essentially kill the data. They have made a digital product not digital. And PDFs are portable, but the data then gets crushed. And you have to hire a data scientist or a data engineer or an automation specialist who knows Python to get it back. Knows Python, natural language processing, OCR. Right. So you're spending money to get it back. There's so many data killers. If you allow your staff to create that form or have that form created once and allow your staff to just send out requests for data and not sort of worry about sending that form around, you have stopped the printing killing of data and you're starting curating data. The other thing you can do is set up these templates for the sheets. So every time you say you want a name, guess what? It's going to be standardized.
You have a good use case. I want you to talk a little about use case. Army Corps of Engineers is starting to do what? Talk a little bit about that. They've been a Smartsheet user for a while.
They are using it for one of my favorite processes, change order processing, construction. We should have had this in my house when we did the major construction, capturing the change orders. And so the Corps of Engineers is using Smartsheet to modernize a lot of their processes, including policy management, resource management, and data collection across the departments. A cartographer developed a capability to develop a cartographer, right? Not even an IT guy, right?
Map person.
That person got recognized, Kelsey, for the great work. So they're streamlining that data collection with the Smartsheet forms and automating that process. And the processes look something like this. I have a standard form. I'm going to meet with my stakeholders, talk about the changes, agree, disagree, define it, write it down, put that data in the form, send that to my budget office to make sure we can afford it within cost. It's never within cost, by the way. And then present it back to the parties to sign it. Signing off is the cool new feature that's coming out pretty soon in the government version of Smartsheet this summer. Integrating a document builder, so like a letter or something needs to be signed. It looks like a letter, a document, and tying it with DocuSign and getting that signed. And so you can imagine, I need a permit. I need the inspector to sign off on that permit. You can automate that process and build that document, that permit once, have it signed. Guess what? It's stored. The signature that someone signed it is stored in that sheet. You just go back to that very simple sheet and see what's happened with this data. Where is it in the process? And did they sign it? Did we agree upon it? Can I afford it? Should we do it? Or should we go back to square one?
And I mentioned that the change order process for the Army Corps of Engineers, as an example, is reducing time. It's more efficient. They're able to, okay, we need to make a change. Okay, how quickly can we get it done? Is there any data that you have or anything that you know in terms of, hey, that used to take them 6 weeks, now it takes them 6 hours, or
I don't have those statistics, but I'm sure they're
it has to.
Saving time in orders of magnitude.
You also brought up the e-signature piece, which I think is really key when you talk about the IDEA Act and the work that OMB was doing to implement it.
Signatures,
they talked about that idea, how important e-signature was. And I'm sure you remember back in the e-government days, e-signature, e-authentication was a big deal. So it's starting to come back. Where should agencies start as they kind of go down this path? There's no one's at 0, no one's at 100. We always know that they're always in some form of journey. But what's that form like? Okay, I know we have a lot of forms. We can get better about it. What do we do?
I would say you know your forms are. Take the one that has the largest number of data errors, maybe, or the one that has the largest backlog at the end of the process because you're still filing or doing something manual, and just pilot that one form. Develop a sheet, develop an approach, what that data is, develop the form, and start piloting it. Capture the economics. Sorry, I didn't have them today for the Corps of Engineers, but if you capture the economics, you'll have the business justification to keep going. You're not going to start big with Smartsheet. It is something that starts small and becomes viral as people start to see the value and they invest in learning on what that tool can do.
I'm surprised you didn't start with the data. Because again, if you can look at your data and say, well, 80% of what we're collecting is all the same, maybe we should just standardize on the 80%. Is that has to be a piece to this discussion too?
It's a piece of the overall discussion. I've updated my thinking a little bit over the 40 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we all evolve, right?
Yeah. So a long time ago, when we were also doing waterfall, we were thinking about data architecture as a do it first. Set the architecture, figure out all the things you're going to need, and then you can start developing and attaching that to forms. I think you're starting to see much more of an iterative architecture build and an iteration on concepts in the data world like master data management, right? So I know I need to connect people data around Donna. I could try to figure out where all that data is, how all that data is connected first, or I could just take the first form.
Yeah.
Take the first form, take the second form, adjust, take the third form, adjust. And that's really where we're seeing a lot more progress with a lot of our clients.
All right. There's a lot more to do. Unfortunately, we are out of time for our discussion today. So let me thank my guest. Donna Roy is the Federal Advisory Board member at Smartsheet. Donna, always great to catch up. Thanks so much.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.